when he made the comments about don't blaming the coaches. You got to look at the players. They got to play better. Did you agree with that?
Davey Martinez is as player-friendly managers I've ever had.
Major breaking news in the National League. Jeff Passan, what is it?
Kevin, the Washington Nationals have fired general manager Mike Rizzo as well as manager Davey Martinez.
Just over a month ago, the Washington Nationals reached heights they hadn't reached for half a decade. They were barely out of a playoff spot. The general manager of the team was publicly defending his manager, and the franchise had somehow proved that trading away Juan Soto before he was even in his prime was a good decision. But just a few weeks later, Jeff Passan would break the news that the Washington Nationals had fired general manager Mike Rizzo and manager Davey Martinez. But what changed in such a short amount of time? What could have caused the Nationals to fire their general manager of nearly 20 years? But more importantly, do the Nationals have a plan in place to send the franchise back to the playoffs, let alone the World Series for the first time in over 6 years? But before we get into it, I wanted to announce a new giveaway we're doing for the channel. Every single week, I will be giving away an MLB jersey to a subscriber who has their notifications turned on. So if you don't already have that done, please do that right now. And I'm really excited to be giving away these jerseys. I'll be announcing a winner each week in each of my videos. Now that that's out of the way, let's get right into it. Let's start with the cold hard truth about where this team stands right now. As of July 5th, the Washington Nationals sit at 37-53, which puts them a season high 16 games under 500. That's not just bad, that's really bad for an organization that won a World Series just 6 years ago. But here's what makes it even more painful. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not this year, not anymore. See, when the Nationals made that blockbuster Juan Soto trade back in August 2022, they got what many called a generational trade haul. CJ Abrams, Mackenzie Gore, James Wood, Robert Hassel III, Jarlin Susana, and Luke Voigt. That trade was supposed to be the foundation of the next championship team. And 3 years later, those same players are here. They're developed and some of them are balling, but the team is worse. CJ Abrams has an 840 OPS with 33 extra base hits. James Wood's OPS is nearly 1,000 and he already has 23 home runs, while Mackenzie Gore has a 3.11 ERA with 131 strikeouts. These guys are performing exactly as advertised. So why are the Nationals still losing? Well, remember that 10-game losing streak that I mentioned from June? During that losing streak, fans at Nationals Park were literally booing and chanting, "Fire Davey." When Davey Martinez was asked about the team's recent skid, he was extremely defensive of his coaches and went out of his way to put the blame on the players.
Never on coaching. Okay, coaches work their asses off every single day. We're not going to finger point here and say it's coaches. It's never on the coaches. They work hard. The message is clear. All the work is done prior. Sometimes, they got to go out there and they got to play the game. It's always been about the players. Always.
After this, the Nationals general manager Mike Rizzo said this when asked if Davey Martinez was right about the coaching staff deserving no blame.
Davey Martinez is as player-friendly managers I've ever had. There's onus on the players, there's onus on the coaches, there's onus on the manager, and there's a great onus on the general manager to do a better job.
Now, at one point of time, on May 31st, the Washington Nationals still had a season full of potential. They were just 5 games out of a wild card spot, hovering around 500, and their young stars were breaking out. A month later, and the Nationals fired the 2 men who had helped turn their franchise into World Series champions after they were once the ultimate rejects of baseball. So to understand why this firing is so shocking, at least to me, you need to understand who Mike Rizzo really is in Washington Nationals history. This man is literally the architect of the only championship in franchise history, and he did it all while being with the team from the very beginning. Mike Rizzo took over as GM in 2009 when the Nationals were a laughingstock. However, he was first hired by the team back in 2006 as an assistant general manager. For reference, the Nationals moved to DC just 1 year prior from Montreal. They were practically a brand new franchise, and Rizzo was going to have a heavy influence in what the team did moving forward. Under his leadership, they went from 59 wins in 2009 to 98 wins in 2012. The first team in over 100 years to improve by at least 10 wins 4 straight seasons. 4 NL East titles. titles, 1 World Series championship, over 1,000 wins as a general manager. He built that 2019 championship team by being aggressive in free agency, signing guys like Max Scherzer, Jason Worth, and Ryan Zimmerman to big deals. But here's the thing that's been haunting Rizzo for the past few years: the criticism that he can't develop talent internally. Fox Sports ripped into him about this during the Soto trade, saying, through a combination of trades, poor drafting, and lackluster player development, the farm system has never been much of a strength under GM Mike Rizzo. Think about it. Outside of Juan Soto, who was the last impact player the Nationals developed from their own system? Anthony Rendon, Steven Strasburg, maybe Bryce Harper, but those guys are from over a decade ago. That's also without mentioning the fact that Steven Strasburg and Bryce Harper were two of the most can't-miss prospects of all time. Take, for example, Elijah Green, the 2022 5th overall pick in the MLB draft. Green was expected to skyrocket through the minors coming out of IMG Academy. However, he's currently stuck in high A, hitting 171 with an OPS under 600. That now brings us to the Juan Soto situation, which might perfectly sum up the entire Mike Rizzo tenure. In June 2022, when trade rumors were swirling, Rizzo came out and said, "We are not trading Juan Soto. We have every intention of building this team around Juan Soto." And who could blame them? He was already a World Series champion and was on pace to become a Hall of Famer at the age of 22. 2 months later, though, Soto was in a Padres uniform. Now, to be fair to Rizzo, Soto had turned down a 15-year, $440 million extension, what would have been the largest contract in baseball history at the time. Plus, the return he got for Soto was incredible. And I mean, seriously, like, imagine telling a Nationals fan in 2022 they'd end up winning the Juan Soto trade. So honestly, props to Mike Rizzo, because not many people can say they've traded a generational talent and ended up on the winning side of that trade. But here's the brutal irony. Rizzo's greatest triumph, that Soto trade, has also become his biggest question mark. Because if you get that kind of a haul and none of them are busts, then how are you still 15 games under 500 3 years later? What does that say about your ability to build a winner in the modern world of baseball? Now, I also want to talk about Davey Martinez, because his story is equally complicated. Martinez was hired after the 2017 season despite lacking the public polish of other candidates. As one Washington Post reporter put it, he lacked the public polish of some of his more highly touted peers, a little less smooth with his words, a little less focused on proving he could reinvent the baseball wheel. But you know what? That blue-collar, players-first approach worked. A few years later, in 2019, after a terrible start where everyone wanted him fired, Martinez led the Nationals to their first World Series championship. Doesn't that sound familiar? A Nationals team with a ton of young talent started off slow before catching fire at the end of the season. The parallels to this year are actually kind of eerie. Back in June, Rizzo was comparing the situations.
You guys had Davey out the door in 19, too. The coaches fired, the GM fired, the owners sell the team. Your station, every other station wanted him fired.
But here's the difference. In 2019, they had veteran talent. They had Max Scherzer and Steven Strasburg at the top of the rotation. They had Anthony Rendon and Juan Soto in the lineup. They had championship caliber pieces. This year, they're asking Martinez to develop young players while winning games, and that's an impossible balance. You either develop players at the cost of your record, or you win at the cost of player development. It's rare you see a team do both at the same time. So why fire Martinez now? Was it really just about the record? Here's where it gets really interesting, because despite all the losing, Rizzo constantly said Martinez still had the pulse of the clubhouse and was beloved by players. But remember those comments Martinez made that reportedly left players shocked, dismayed, and pissed? Rizzo had to clean that up, saying this.
I know Davey talked to all the players after those comments were made. That's behind it.
So maybe it wasn't behind them after all. Or maybe this was never really about Martinez. Maybe this was about ownership finally losing patience with the entire operation. And another thing that's been flying under the radar, but might be the key to this entire situation, is that the Lerner family has been exploring selling the team since April 2022. I know recently it's been reported they're no longer interested in selling the team, but I wouldn't be too shocked if they did that for strategic purposes. When you're trying to sell a franchise, losing 10 games in a row with a roster full of young, unproven talent is not exactly a selling point. So if these rumors end up being true, then that means these firings might not be about performance at all. This might be about cleaning house for new ownership. But let's be honest about what this really represents: the complete failure of a rebuild strategy. Rizzo said said back in 2022. We've put in this system in the last few years. 15 or 16 high quality, high tooled up players that have very impactful futures ahead of them. But 3 years later, where are they? Still losing, still rebuilding, still promising that better days are ahead. Federal baseball summed it up perfectly. There is a feeling among fans and around the industry that the pairing has gotten stale. To be fair to Mike Rizzo, nearly 25 years at one franchise is an insane amount of time. And when Ken Rosenthal calls your organization a bottom feeder and fans are agreeing with him, you have a problem that goes beyond just wins and losses. So where do the Nationals go from here? Well, first, let's talk about the immediate impact. The MLB draft is next week, and the draft deadline is just over 3 weeks away. Firing your president of baseball operations a week before the draft, it's either panic or it's part of a bigger plan. If this is about new ownership wanting to bring in their own people, we could see a couple of organizational overhauls. New front office, new coaching staff, maybe even trading some of those young players that were supposed to be the foundation. That would be the ultimate irony, trading away the Juan Soto return package just to start another rebuild. But to be honest, I wouldn't be shocked if that happened. But here's what I think is most likely. Whoever comes in next is going to inherit a roster with genuine talent. CJ Abrams, James Wood, Mackenzie Gore, these guys aren't the problem. The problem has been everyone around them. The development infrastructure, the organizational culture, the inability to supplement the young talent with veteran leadership and depth pieces. I'm sorry, but if CJ Abrams gambling until the sun comes up when he has a game the next day is an issue you have, then your franchise needs a new culture. This story isn't really about Mike Rizzo and Davey Martinez getting fired. This is about the impossible challenge of building sustainable success in modern baseball, especially when ownership refuses to invest in the actual product. Rizzo did prove he could build a winner when he had the resources and veteran talent. The 2019 championship team was built through good drafting, free agency, and smart trades. Scherzer, Rendon, Strasburg, Turner, and Soto all had significant impacts on the team's World Series run. But when ownership mandated a rebuild after 2021, asking him to develop young talent on a budget, that's a completely different skill set, and the results speak for themselves. I mean, seriously, imagine being the general manager of a team whose owner refuses to pay the generational talent you've developed. Bryce Harper and Juan Soto both were out of DC by their age 25 season, all because ownership refused to meet their price. The worst part is the one time they did pay a player in Steven Strasburg, he ended up having the rest of his career plagued by injuries. And Martinez proved he could manage talented veterans to a championship. But managing a young, developing team while still being expected to win, that's also a completely different challenge. As Rizzo said in that June radio interview, all these rebuilds aren't linear. Landscapes change, injuries happen, player performance doesn't develop as on schedule as you would like. Maybe that was him admitting that this rebuild had gone off the rails. So here's the brutal truth about this situation. The Washington Nationals went from World Series champions to firing both their GM and manager in less than 6 years. That's not just organizational failure, that's organizational collapse. And the saddest part, they had everything they needed to avoid this. Young talent, draft picks, payroll flexibility, a fan base willing to be patient because of 2019. Instead, they're 37-52 and starting completely over again. I guess you could argue they have a lot of good young players like James Wood and Mackenzie Gore, and while you'd be right, you'd be missing one important factor. Nationals fan page Federal Baseball put it perfectly. Winning trades is great, but winning games is a whole lot better. Mike Rizzo won the Juan Soto trade, but he never figured out how to win games with the return. And in sports, winning is all that matters. So there you have it, the fall of Mike Rizzo and Davey Martinez, and with them, the end of an era in Washington baseball. These firings represent more than just a mid-season shakeup. They represent the complete failure of a post-championship rebuild strategy and the brutal reality that in modern baseball, there are no guarantees. 6 years ago, these two men were celebrating a World Series championship together. Martinez literally said, "I couldn't see myself doing this without Riz. He's guided me through my first year here through thick and thin. He's like a brother to me." Today, they're both looking for new jobs. The question now is whether the next regime can finally unlock the potential of this young core, or if we're about to watch another rebuild begin before the last one ever really ended. But what do you guys think? Were these firings justified, or is this organization just circling through scapegoats while the real problems go unaddressed? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into the Nationals organizational collapse, please make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell because we'll be tracking this story as it develops. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.